Okay, hello everyone. This is Sachin, and welcome to our very special interview today with a dear friend of mine and colleague, and somebody who I consider my brother. I think we've got a golden thread running through both of us, and so we're connected in so many different ways. Sayer G. Sayer, thanks for being here today.
Thank you. It's truly my honor. I am such a devotee of your work, and I just, you have so many talents. Your quotes, on a daily basis, uplift me, open me up, blow my mind. You're just, you're really a genius when it comes to communicating healing messages to people.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. It's such an honor. You never know who's watching and who's listening. So, for the practitioners out there and for all of you out there, keep spreading the message. And I love to introduce Sayer as a truth teller, somebody who has fearlessly stood up to what is the absolute truth. And it's just been amazing to witness as a friend and somebody who's kind of watching and admiring from afar and up close as well. So thank you for your time. I know how busy you are, and I appreciate your support. And, I'm really excited for this conversation, but I'm also excited for a conversation we're going to have at the end of August for, practitioners and health coaches, because what we're going to be talking about is how to usher in a new paradigm of healthcare. And you did that with your book, Regenerate. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about that, because I feel like we did the interview when you launched the book, and I'm feeling that it's even more relevant now. So I don't know, there's divine sacred timing in all of this. And there's never been a more appropriate time to talk about Regenerate. So let's talk about that first.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, I'm just really aware of the interesting timing of launching a book at the moment that no bookstores were open on the planet. And due to, one of the topics of today's discussion, the conventional medical system, and seeing this transition to something more regenerative, more beautiful. And in the moment that the conventional medical system became a political weapon, if you will, in terms of taking over the entire planet, paralyzing socioeconomic activity, and we're still obviously following in that wake. I definitely think that the intention was to bring in research that I know you've been helping people become aware of, that shows the body actually is this incredibly resilient, self-regenerating miracle. And the new biology, the new physics is now showing us that this isn't just what mystics have been saying, or Eastern practitioners, or homeopaths, or naturopaths. This is actually coming from really hard-nosed empirical science. And that was my intention, was to show people that the paradigm has shifted and we're ready now. Let's take away the 20-year delay from when published research actually makes it into the clinician's practice. So that was sort of part of the idea behind Regenerate.
What I love about Regenerate is it kind of brings together this idea that we are our own best healers, right? And the regeneration process occurs from within. If we look at everything in nature, if we look at a plant, if we look at a seed, if we look at an egg as it's hatching, all that growth takes place from a place deep inside of us. And I love how the book kind of poetically expresses it, mathematically expresses that idea, and biologically expresses that idea that we all witness, you know what I mean? And I think, like, one of the things growing up in school, I would always turn to my friends and ask them, when am I going to use calculus in real life? And when am I going to use the stuff I'm learning in real life? And I was right questioning all of that. I was really correct, because that's not the mathematics that governs biology. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that too, just to give people an understanding the difference between Euclidean math, which is what we learn in school, and fractal math, which is the mathematics of the cosmos. And of course, we're part of the cosmos at varying scales, right? We're a universe within a universe. So let's talk about that a little bit, because when we get the math right, then we can start, the math can start explaining the phenomenon that we see in daily life.
That's a beautiful question. It was you, actually, while I was still writing my book, that started to reference in some of your quotes concepts that I thought that I was privy to in my own reflection. So it was really amazing, because at one point, I think you said that food is fractal in nature, which is actually featured on the cover. It's Romanesco cauliflower. and that our bodies are fractal in nature. And when you said that, it was almost like this like lightning bolt of, oh my Lord, I really wish I had written that in the book, because it's so true, is that the informational density, you could say, of a fractal is so vast. And in our body's complexity in the same way is so vast and holographic in ways, meaning it's scale invariant. I mean, on a relative level where you keep going down in scale and you see the same pattern. And that was so helpful for me to basically contextualize the advocacy, because when you look at conventional allopathic treatments, especially petrochemical derived medications, this magic monochemical concept of, you know, treating specific biological processes or symptoms, it's so simplistic and informationally is so it's just so simple. It doesn't have enough information, in other words, to perform the complexity needed within the body. So when you brought that up, it reminds me of what you're bringing up. So actually, I'd like you to talk more about it, because you really inspired me on that.
Well, you know, I think the big thing for me, the big revelation for me was, you know, how can we explain what's happening? How can we explain the phenomenon of what's happening? And it was while I was watching a Mendelbrot Zoom. So for those of you that don't know who Mendelbrot is, he's a mathematician that in the 70s discovered this concept of fractal mathematics, but it wasn't until they were able to put it into computers and actually visualize these equations. So you take an equation, a really simple equation, and you put the answer that you get from that equation back into the equation, and it creates this self-similar, self-repeating pattern. And when you start studying things like, you know, Tom O'Brien had a great picture of this. He showed a slide where he showed a rat brain stained, where they stain the neurons, and he showed a picture right next to it of the biggest picture we have of dark matter in the universe. And you couldn't tell the two apart. They looked almost identical to one another. So there's this self-repeating pattern. And we know this from religions and other texts that talk about the concept of as is the microcosm, so is the macrocosm. So this self-repeating pattern is basically the basis of our entire life. And so when we understand this concept, we start looking at things very, very differently. And even the subtle energies in our body, which are creating, you know, a vibration, a fractal code, is what's creating our reality in front of us. So it's you know, as is the outside, so is the inside, you know, as above, so below, as is the microcosm, so is a macrocosm. And so as I'm watching this, you know, fractal Zoom, I'm starting to pick up information. And what I'm starting to realize is, wow, the surface area of this equation, of this image that I'm seeing, is essentially infinite, which means if the surface area is infinite, then the data storage capacity becomes infinite. And now I can have infinite amounts of information stored in a very, very small space. And then you start thinking about our body, and the only way our body can take all of this surface area and wrap it inside of itself without interfering with itself is through fractal mathematics. So we have this visual representation using a Mendelbrot Zoom. We also have a visual representation when we go for a walk in the forest, right? We see, you know, shapes and structures and that basically resemble our own body parts. So as you're walking through the forest, the way I look at it is I look at it as if I'm walking through somebody's brain. You know, we've got all this nervous tissue underneath us through the mycelium. We've got, you know, the connection that's taking place and the synergistic, the information is being shared synergistically. And it's just really fascinating to be able to look at it and have a formula that can explain it at every single scale. And when I share this with people, including people like yourself, you just kind of get this profound visual and you start seeing it, and then you can't unsee it. But then you start to understand where the failings of modern medicine are. So one of the keys of nature is that there's no smooth lines in nature. There's no such thing as a smooth line in nature. There's no smooth lines in life, right? Our life from A to B is never a perfectly smooth line. So you start applying these principles of nature, you realize you are nature, you understand that you have to live and obey the codes of nature, and it starts explaining aspects of your life in so many different ways, like not just your biology, but you know, even your circumstance can be explained using this type of mathematical, you know, subset. So it's almost hard to describe, right? I can see it in my head. So I
Yeah.
hope I'm not losing anyone as I'm describing this, but it's really fascinating. And then when your book came out and I saw the Romanesco on there on the cover, I was like, man, this is like such a perfect representation of that. And again, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Your paradigm of everything completely shifts and shatters.
Yeah, I mean, what you just said just brought several things back to me. The mystery, of Levinthal's paradox, which is related to the near infinite amount of information needed for a protein to attain its native conformational state, meaning when it goes from the primary sequence of amino acids, like in a string, down to secondary folding state to the tertiary folding state, which is very complex, and then the quaternary state between proteins. In order to go from primary to just tertiary, there are mathematically potentially an infinite number of possible variations that it needs to pass through to attain the one perfect conformation. So when you're looking at the fractal of the cauliflower, the proteins in there, for example, and one might do a similar analysis with carbohydrates, but the proteins already, by implication, relative to conventional math, contain an infinite amount of information, at least indirectly, because of what it didn't manifest folding as. It's very interesting. So that was part of the rabbit hole for me when I was trying to understand food as information. And it's a beautiful etymology because it means to put form into. As we think about food in terms of its fuel for our body, it's the building blocks, the macronutrients, micronutrients, and it's, very mechanical view. Whereas the information has to come from somewhere, and it doesn't just come from food because there's the morphogenic field and all the other subtle layers, but there is information in food, and it indicates a really profound intelligence, basically. It goes almost from acknowledging massive infinite information to, wow, this is intelligent. And when you say fractal, I think about the paradox, right, of the walnut having this perfect bihemispheric brain-like structure, even with a corpus callosum, a skull shot through with omega-3 fatty acids, which are, preferentially beneficial for the brain, neuroprotective compounds. I mean, it is literally a mammalian skull and brain, and it feeds that very organ. So you have like the doctrine of signatures, and so I tried to understand that out. And when I was trying to understand why do certain things look like the organs that they are therapeutic for, it could be epithelial tissue like flaxseed. Amazing, right? These seeds look like little epithelial cells. They have mucilaginous gel they secrete just like the mucosa. And they're very specific to healing breast and prostate tissue, which are both epithelial tissues. I mean, to the point where it's basically like a chemotherapy alternative, in my opinion, to take flaxseed. I mean, obviously it's more prophylactically because of the nutrigenomic aspects of the healing properties. So when we get into like fractal geometry and understanding food as information, intelligence, and then we can go deeper into even what compassion means from the perspective of exosome-mediated information transfer between the kingdoms of life, plant and vegetable, vegetable and plant. And then it's like, wow, this is really a whole new vision of an interconnected world, an interbeing, as Thich Nhat Hanh said, but in the really hard molecular biology sciences right now.
So since you went there, let's go there. Right now, we're separated from people we love, people we care about. I'm used to traveling 2 to 3 times a month. I know you like to get out and about in nature, and you travel quite a bit too. So, what does it mean when we're not like? What are the implications of this besides the superficial stuff, right? What are the implications of this at a being level?
Yeah. Well, when you said walking through the forest and almost seeing the same patterns, that's like the Japanese practice of bathing in the forest.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the name. It's like shiriatsu or something. And it's a literal clinically validated therapeutic practice. And it is to breathe in and bathe in the, I guess, holofractal nature of our self-similarity with nature. And there's something about that, like when you, I guess, clear the blinders and you really experience oneness, not as a concept, but a connection, a felt intimate embodiment with the world, or the world and you. There's like a reciprocity. It's just, that's a type of healing that actually I think addresses the first trauma, which you could say is birth, which is something that is built into the nature of incarnation. We come through the world, through our mother. It can be an orgasmic birth in a, warm, a water birth, but it could also be obstetric and just extremely violent with circumcision, vaccination following, and formula. And so we all, on some level throughout life spiritually, have to learn to heal the original disconnect or wound. And so it brings a lot of that up for me, what you're bringing up.
Yeah, no, I love that. And just for people who are maybe, I know there's some people that are further along in their journey of discovering these truths. Was there a turning point for you, or a light bulb that went off, or something that you heard, or a book that you read that really made you become like hyper aware of what you're talking about?
Thank you for asking. I love hanging with you, man. We've never had an opportunity to hang in person. Oh, we did actually out in Utah, Powder
During the
Mountain.
eclipse, yeah.
That's right. And you lived the dream. You were out there with your shirt off, soaking in the rays, grounding before I even knew what that was, basically. But yeah, it was for me. I was a student of philosophy in college, and I really loved Merleau-Ponty's work. His posthumously published The Visible and Invisible, and it was an ontology, meaning a way of describing reality entire, called the Ontology of the Flesh. And in that book, he completely, if you will, transcends Cartesianism, this ancient rift in the Western psyche between there's two substances, res cogitans, thinking substance, and res extensa, material substance. And all of us, whether we know it or not, have been enculturated and traumatized into the view that, the brain is like the kidney and consciousness like urine. It's an excreta, an epiphenomena. What's real is the material atoms, the flesh, and it's not the soul. That doesn't mean anything. There's the mind, which is like electrical activity in the brain. This view is ontologically, it's so imprisoning and so dehumanizing and eviscerating of the soul that we may not know this, but it informs all of the sciences and humanities in the West. So for me, when I started reading Merleau-Ponty's work, I started to really understand that he was seeing a vision of reality that was not that different from Tao Te Ching or many of these indigenous traditions that understood that the earth is a body, it is intelligent. We have certain natural laws that are not just physical, but there are spiritual laws. It all started to make sense to me. So that was around, my 20s, that early 20s is when I started to really understand and feel this reality. But it's taken me many years to come back to this, which is actually what Regenerate was an attempt to do. Agreement Info, it's a great advocacy, 10 years. How many studies on turmeric do people really need, or do I want to look at? And now it's coming back to my roots, which is really trying to integrate and heal myself. And then hopefully with that, I can provide some help to those who are also on a similar path.
Amazing. How receptive do you find people are to this? Is there an initial resistance when people encounter this, or are you attracting the people right into your fold that are ready to learn this and view the world a different way?
That's a good question. I'm so blessed to have Kelly, of course, my beloved wife and just partner in all things on this journey, because she, several years ago, really took the deep dive into personal healing work. And when you do that, you realize you connect to the collective in a new way. Your suffering and your trauma and your healing helps you to really understand and empathize with others. And I think that's the path with heart. That's what Jack Kornfield, many years ago, I was introduced to his work because actually after spending many years just immersed in trying to figure it all out, theory of everything, and, I'm going to help Merleau-Ponty realize his vision of getting this new ontology out. I was really into Eastern religion, and I realized after I graduated from college that I needed to go experience religion, Eastern religious experience. I went to a monastery in upstate New York, a Zen monastery, and I spent some time there as a residential instructee, and that's when I tried to experience the thing itself. So, but it's been interesting path because only recently have I come out of the closet with this stuff, honestly, because I really wasn't ready. And now that the book's done and that we're in this post-COVID world where, you know what, it's clearly time to show up fearlessly out of love and just go ahead and do it. And that's kind of where I'm at, which I feel like you are as well.
Yeah, you know, I feel like every day is a new day for all of us to fully bloom and express ourselves. And if you're in this garden of Sayer, let's say, or Sachin, however you look at it, you know, just know that we're here to, you know, water those seeds and provide the soil for that germination to take place. And this is a safe place for that to happen, because many people don't have that safe place. So they might be thinking a certain way, or they might become enlightened in certain ways, but then the people that they hang around with may not be receptive or may not be doing the same work. And so I just want everyone who's tuned in to know that we love you, we admire you, and we're here for you. And we want to create a sacred soil where all of us can germinate in such a beautiful way, because there's nothing more that the world needs right now than more people waking up to this reality and stepping into their own truth and regenerating their bodies. But at the same time, like, how do we kind of regenerate this? We need to regenerate more than, you know, individually. We need a collective regeneration to take place. Like we need to regenerate medicine too. And you know, I'd love your thoughts on that, because I know I've been trying, you've been trying, but and we're open to any comments that come in as well. But what do you think is the way that we can make that happen? Now that we have all this evidence, what do we do with it, and how do we change the paradigm?
Well, I love what you just expressed. I feel like, I mean, you roped me into this event because I've been off in, oh, let's fight the COVID psyop world. And it's interesting, before I hopped on my new Telegram channel, I asked the poll, like, what do you want to hear from, you know? And it was really this. They really want to hear radical resilient strategies. They want more about regeneration. They need the positivity. And one thing I've always loved about what you do is you hold that space, because even in my meditation this morning, I was thinking, like, I just want to be a peaceful warrior, you know? That's really what it's about. And I spend so much time fighting the monster that, like Nietzsche said, you can become the monster. Or he said, be careful looking into the abyss because it can look into you. And never before has that been more resonant. So I think to heal the medical framework, there's a number of things. Like, we have to diagnose, I think, what is actually happening, which is, for me, medicine long ago, but now we're seeing it clearly, transmogrified, I'll use a hyperbolic word like that, into a geopolitical control system. I know that Foucault talked about biopolitics, and he understood medicine as being not so much about taking care of people as controlling large numbers of people. And never before have we seen how clearly something like, quote, COVID has been used to control the entire world's population, economy, all the civil rights that formerly sovereign soil states held, completely obviated by this. So that was clear to me before this happened, because I went down the rabbit hole of understanding what vaccines really are and what the agendas are behind them. So this is no surprise. So what I wanted to do with Regenerate is help people see a vision, not unlike what you're describing. In ways, you're a step ahead, because Regenerate's more of a bridge. I focused on the role of exosomes, because the implication is, when you start understanding the role of exosomes in, the spiral of life, is that plants and animals communicate essential genetic information to one another that have made them dependent over long coevolutionary stretches of time. So, for example, the angiosperm plants that produce most of the food still that we eat in the world, okay, the fruit-bearing plants, seed-bearing plants, they co-evolved with metazoa, complex animal life, starting about 200,000 years ago, where some of the functions of reproduction for the plants and the animals basically got outsourced to the other kingdom. So, and you said this in another quote again, which was disturbing to me. I was in the middle of writing my book, and you wrote something about how fruit is software for the hardware of your body. I'm like, oh my God, he did it again. I was trying to articulate that very thing, and I did, but I didn't do it so succinctly. But that is the key, because what happens is, when in, let's say, equatorial zones where you don't have a lot of wind and you need to disperse these seeds of jungle, fruit plants, for example, you basically make delicious coatings called the fruit we eat around the seed, and these little animals come and they eat it, and they help disperse the seed. And in exchange, the animals get amazing nutrition, but they get information and software upgrades, if you will, to their hardware. And that is why, here's a grotesque example, but it's very telling. In the ovarectomy-induced model of osteoporosis, let's say in mammal rodent studies, they take the ovaries out of a female animal. Within a few weeks, they develop full-blown osteoporosis and signs of menopause, dysphoria, and other things. If you give one group pomegranate or orange or plums, it's as if you never took their ovaries out. And that's because the plum, the ovary, is the ovary of that plant. And so that was an example. It's like where vitamin C isn't produced by our body anymore, outside of potentially the microbiome. That's something that was discovered recently. That's an example of outsourcing an indispensable function to the foods we eat. So what I'm trying to say is that the discovery of these connections, and actually exosomes specifically, indicate that we can eat our way back in time to what you might call a paleo restoration framework. And there are people that advocate for this in the ancestral community. Paleo is like, raw honey has a strain of lactobacillus that's been identified to have been in the midgut of the bee for like 89 million years. So when we eat that raw honey, we're getting a strain that otherwise modern man and woman has probably not seen, or it's been eradicated through chemicals. But once you have that strain, it's almost like you're healing intergenerational karma, biospheric intergenerational karma that goes back thousands, if not tens of thousands of generations, because you're getting back what you needed and co-evolved in the former framework to have optimal health. I know this sounds really complex, and I don't want it to, but what you said is true. We get software from the foods that are, of course, ancestral, that without which the hardware of our body cannot function adequately. That's kind of what I was trying to say.
No, I love that. And I think that, the people that are tuned in today are, I would feel at least, a lot more receptive to receiving this message, or may have, the framework, but they haven't put it all together. So I hope that this is resonating with everyone, and you just have a beautiful way of expressing yourself that I enjoy listening to. I could listen to you for hours, and certainly love all the work that you put out there.
Well, I should qualify myself, because this, timeline of 200 million years ago and the development of metazoa, right, our, mammalian predecessors could be triggering to some. And I'm starting to open myself to different timelines of our origins that are mutually exclusive, and trying to find a way to accept them and understand that I certainly am not enlightened and don't have all the answers. So it's not yet fully healed or integrated in my own vision, but I can tell you the implication is really profound. Because, for example, when I did my turmeric project and I went and spent 6 months looking at the 10,000 studies available at the time to do the database for turmeric on Greenman Info, we came up with 3,000 studies across about 800 different diseases that turmeric appears to either prevent or mitigate. And I was like, well, that's 1/3 of all the diseases I've indexed for the entire project. How can one plant be a panacea, a cure-all? And I started to understand that when you look at the pharmacological actions that we were indexing on it, there was several hundred of these distinct different abilities it had. It was almost like the many hands of some type of Hindu god or goddess, being able to simultaneously orchestrate a near infinite number of functions to have a beneficial effect for an individual. I mean, in some cases, it's going to raise blood pressure. In other cases, it will lower it. It's adaptogenic. It's intelligent. And I started to understand the word compassion means to suffer with. And if there is this coevolutionary codependence between species, the truth is when one of the members suffers, the other will as well. Which means, let's say we eat a standard American diet, we have no berries and no fruit. Good luck maintaining your genetic expression with health and prosperity and wellness in this life. Because we have co-developed so that we require certain foods and their benefits. And that's where I started realizing that things are so interwoven that is one of the ways of understanding how compassion is woven in. Why is turmeric a goddess that glows a compassionate glow in Hindu mythology? Well, because it really does care for humanity, especially if we care for it. And this is not pseudoscience. This is starting to be validated by science itself.
I love that. It's so great to witness, such amazing, like, ancient wisdom being brought into into modern medicine and being implemented and applied. Aside from turmeric, what are some other plants or substances that you've identified that have similar properties?
Interestingly, the biomedical, if you will, research over the past 20 years has focused on green tea, resveratrol, turmeric as probably being, and I'm probably pronouncing that in a way that triggers people. Everyone says I pronounce it wrong. I'm just going to keep calling it turmeric because it sounds right to me. But anyway, there's so many studies indicating that these substances are resilience promoting. And it's interesting, they contain polyphenols, which within the xenohermetic hypothesis indicate that, let's say I'm an animal, I eat a stressed grape, it has higher levels of resveratrol because it's a compound produced in a way to communicate to me that there is an oncoming stressful climate situation occurring, because it's trying to also promote longevity with me because it benefits, I distributed seeds. So it's a really interesting concept. So polyphenols like curcumin, catechin in green tea, resveratrol in grapes and other fruits, even chocolate, they have this unique ability to stimulate resilience and regeneration within the human body. But that's looking at it more granularly. The reality is that what we need more than anything is food grown in quality soil with the elements naturally present and as diverse a biosphere as possible, because they accumulate these molecules as a byproduct of their, the wealth in their biosystem. So it's a very interesting alternative way to understand the benefits of these plants. And people should know that organically grown, or even better, biodynamically grown grape might have orders of magnitude more resveratrol than one that looks even better and cleaner, that's grown conventionally. So our bias is towards nutrition being, again, carbs and micronutrients, etc. But these phyto compounds are extremely beneficial to us.
Yeah, I love that, how you talk about the appearance of a fruit versus something that looks really pretty. And the thought that came up for me is, if I shake somebody's hands and they've got calluses, I know they've done the work, right?
That's good.
And if their hands are pretty and nice and soft, then I know, and that's not to judge anyone, but I know that they haven't done the hard work in the gym or something. I'm referring specifically in a specific context, but sometimes the way we adapt, our bodies adapt, may not be the prettiest, but it's a form of adaptation to a stressor. And that food has to create resilience, and it can then confer that resilience onto the end user, kind of in that that transference of information. Is that accurate in saying that?
Yeah, and I mean, when you say that, I think about a woman, say, and her beauty reflected in these crow's feet. I love a soul that comes through the body and creates these creases. And you think about those who've chosen Botox, and it's such a different way to relate to the world and oneself and to understand what beauty really is. It could be an 80-year-old woman smiling with and I'm just like, wow, that is incredible beauty. And that's what I think we're getting to now. And the same is true for food. Sometimes the uglier it is, the better. So yeah.
There's a interesting image that I share when I do my talk on medicinal mushrooms, and it's a picture of reishi that's grown in a bag inside of like a warehouse versus reishi that grows on a tree. And you could see the stark difference in the color between one that has this resilience that it has to create to survive the elements of being in nature versus one that's grown under sterile conditions. And I feel like that's what's happening right now to us as a population. It's kind of a great metaphor for our population. And we're raising children, we're raising adults in these very sterile environments, and we're starting to see that. It's starting to reflect in their health and in so many different ways. So,
yes.
Go ahead.
Well, no, I love that you brought that up, because when I was going into my elaborate explanation about, you know, xenohomesis, etc., the original question was related to a new paradigm, you know, regenerating our medical paradigm. And what I wanted to bring it back to was realizing that in many ways, the symptoms are the cure, and that allopathy is predicated on inverting that. So like in new biological, like German new medicine, for example, the special biological programs and conflicts happening on a psychic or emotional level, then somaticizing. And it's actually when you get the symptom in that system, that is the beginning of the resolution of the conflict. So everything we think is disease, it could be the symptoms of cold or flu, and that we want to suppress or we're frightened it will kill us, is actually part and parcel of healing the problem. It could be a need for detoxification in the case of infectious viruses, that ultimately they're viral particles or exosomes that are transferring essential detoxification communication between individuals in a community, resulting in greater resilience, which is sometimes called herd immunity, and which vaccinology co-ops because you can't artificially induce herd immunity. It was observed in the natural world with children, for example, passing benign diseases like, you know, chickenpox and measles around. It's only now that they've inverted it to the point where they're saying you're practically a murderer if you don't vaccinate your children 3 times with MMR. I mean, it's a surreal time to come in, call it the Kali Yuga. I mean, so I think that's the basis, though, of what I'm trying to communicate to people, is that we are moving from the body is defective, sinful, and something you should fear. And you need the priest to come and save you with his magical potions and pronouncements and scriptures and all this. To, we need to trust and love our bodies, and understanding that that can only happen in community, like community is immunity, co-immunity, as well as in a natural world where there are certain basic things like clean water, good food, you know, non-native EMF is out of there. You know, this is so basic and simple, but once you get back into that Garden of Eden scenario, the body's capability is infinite when it comes to what we really think. Like, we're all cowering in our homes right now thinking an invisible particle called COVID-19 that somehow came from Wuhan, China, magically is going to tackle us if we don't stay outside of 6 feet from someone or not wear a mask. I mean, this is what people think. The fear alone will induce the very symptoms or even death from the bone pointing, from the sorcery of telling people they're that weak. So Regenerate was always about trying to remind people that actually the science tells a very different story. And had I known this was going to happen, I would have put a whole section on infectious disease. So unfortunately, I didn't anticipate it. So I'm sort of trying to make up for that a little bit now.
I love that. I love that. There are some questions that are coming in, and one of them is a topic that I think we're both quite interested in. It's entheogens. So you want to talk about that a little bit and how that could play a role in helping regenerate medicine and healthcare and regenerating people's health?
Love it. Okay, because here's where I would start. I've always been fascinated by the Proto-Indo-European root for the word health, holy, and heal. We don't know what the word is, but that's the whole point with Proto-Indo-European roots. We know it exists because it's farther down on the branch, you know, sort of like so the implication is that we formerly, in not just, you know, in European speaking civilizations, but also throughout the world, saw health, holiness, sacredness as one. And so what's happened again with that Cartesian division and a number of other things in the West, it's been exorcised. And so entheogens are a shortcut, if you will, to accessing our true nature, which is divine and which does heal itself without any interference by man, without any need for any guru or any priest of the body. The plants teach people, as Terence McKenna would say, he trusts plants, he doesn't trust gurus. It's not to say there aren't gurus or great people in the world that are here to dedicate their life to transmitting wisdom and healing. But there's something ancient about this technology that I believe, I've come to a personal realization around this, that I believe if you go back even 15,000 years ago, we suffered a cataclysm that is still within things like flood myths, that has so traumatized the core of the human collective psyche that we have always used those entheogens to clear, defrag these traumas because they're so massive. There's so much fear and pain that's continually transferred intergenerationally that is the profound grace that's offered by those technologies. Not in 10 lifetimes can you sometimes obtain the clarity and healing that you can in just a few hours of interaction with certain types of these plant medicines. So I am absolutely an advocate of them. And I'm just amazed because I was always envious of the 60s, you know. When I was back in college, I followed the Grateful Dead for a couple, you know, tours. And I was just always amazed that there was still this group of individuals here that were dedicating themselves to like this almost bhakti-like, yes, plant medicine stimulated culture. But to see this come back now at this time, at this moment, with even John Hopkins doing research on this stuff, that's one of the organizations behind Event 201, for those who've done the research, to see it come full circle and the very forces, pharma, at the highest level, who've orchestrated this new geopolitical takeover, are also trying to validate clinically the benefit of these substances. It's really quite a remarkable moment. So even, you know, a lot of people have said, oh, this stuff's so healing, but now we have a ton of research supporting it for that type of application.
Yeah. And, you know, I've got a call later on today with a company that's bringing more, you know, plant-based solutions to the forefront, entheogen solutions to the forefront. And there's actually a lot of financial investment moving in this direction. So I think in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see a huge upsurgence and availability to people for this type of, I like to call it technology. I don't know a better word.
Yeah.
You know, and it's technology that really helps us unlock aspects of us that we all have access to, but we just need that key. And for many people, you know, the entheogens can be that key to help them have that major, major breakthrough. And I've had several myself. And it's just so profound to be able to walk into a room, sit there or lay there for a few hours and walk out as a completely transformed human being. I mean, it's such a profound experience. And, you know, early on when all this COVID stuff hit, I said, you know, here's a solution. We lock everyone down for 2 weeks, right? We send them mung bean sprouts. We teach them how to fast. We teach them how to sprout. We get them drinking clean water, give them some entheogens, right? Teach them how to ground, reset their circadian rhythm. And you'll have people coming out of this in 2 weeks as the most upgraded version of themselves possible. And that's it. And it's done and over with. I mean, sometimes healing can be super, super simple. And I think where a lot of people get stuck on their healing journey is they're focused on the things that they can see and the things that they can measure and the things that are easy to quantify. But entheogens are a whole different world. And it just unlocks a whole different side of you that we can't measure and we can't see, we can't scan.
I would add a qualification because, as you know, it's my tendency to go really light, but then also acknowledge the dark, which is there's something about the involvement of pharma in this that does remind me of what was written about in Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, where you have the reality of soma, which is that there is a trauma, a substance that can clear you of really caring and will give you a state of feeling. I mean, let's just say ecstasy, for example, you know, which has been taken by generations to an extreme in terms of an escape, a hedonic, you know, pathway. So there is an aspect to it, but that's not necessarily entheogen in the traditional sense of a plant that has not been isolated. But I would say that there is always, with anything, an opportunity to do all of this without need of an external substance. However, for those who are aware of this option and have experienced the healing benefit within the right setting and set, it can be so life-changing and so healing that, yes, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, interesting fun fact. I mean, I know we say certain things are hard to measure, but we've been tracking people's HRVs before and after their journeys, and we see a 20-point increase in their HRV, which is unheard of. Like you'd have to, and the transformation happens pretty much overnight without changing anything else in that person's life, their diet, their nutrition. But what happens is as they go through this, there's some deep truths that are released or emotions that are released, and it really uncoils and untangles the central nervous system. So now this antenna, this cosmic antenna that we have, becomes a better receptor of our environment and a better messenger of our truth. So it's so fascinating to see like quantifiable ways of marking this improvement in people, overnight, without all of the other interventions, whether they be medical or even holistic and natural. It's just one intervention and you can see a cut and dry difference between it. So I love that. I love this topic. I'm sure we could talk about it for hours and hours and hours.
Well, I could just add quickly that with Dan Winter's work and describing the 7 different layers of muscle that the heart is comprised of, they contract in sequence, like, and the blood is vortexed. And with heart rate variability, it's an indication that the spiritual heart has opened, which is infinitely intelligent and complex, where it's not being compressed by the external circumstances of the world and the agendas, but it's awakened. So that is a really profound discovery. And I'm really sorry to tell you this, but the power is off on my computer right now, and I'm just gonna have to take a minute to plug it in.
Sure, go ahead.
I'm really sorry about that. Okay.
All right, so while Sayer is hooking up his computer, I would love for each of you to show him some love. I think we're covering some pretty awesome topics, and if there's something that you would like to discuss, then please let us know, and we're happy to dive a little bit deeper. I think I've got him for another 12 minutes or so, so we'll try to make the most of his time. And I would also like to start a discussion as well on COVID, because I know that that's top of mind awareness for many of us. So go ahead and post that in the chat. And if you're enjoying the conversation, let us know. For those of you that are new to our Living Proof audience, welcome. We welcome you and honor you for going on this journey and on your path towards health and healing. And I also wanted to mention that if you're a practitioner or interested in getting into the health space, that we've got a live event that Sayer is going to be speaking at. It's called Perfect Practice Live. And it's August 28th to 30th. And it's geared towards helping, usher in a new era of healthcare. So we've got great speakers like Terry Walls is going to be speaking. James Maskell is going to be speaking. I've got my marketing mentor, Joe Polish, who's going to be speaking. As I mentioned, Sayer is going to be speaking. We have Karan Krishnan, Todd Watts, and Jay David are going to be sharing some powerful insights. So we've got the best of business building and clinical skill set development. And also we've got some major free thinkers like Sayer who are going to be, ushering in new ideas and new concepts and laying down the groundwork for the form of medicine that we all are searching for that doesn't exist. And so it's such an honor to be, on this journey, side by side with you. I know we're hundreds of miles apart, but the technology allows us to be together in this movement. So thank you again for participating. And, before you left, or as you were getting your charger, I wanted to I let everyone know that we would be talking a little bit about COVID. I know there's a lot to unpackage there, but what are your thoughts on everything that's going on right now?
I can't seem to not have an opinion about it lately. I just am wanting to go and, speak on it, because for so many months, I've just been really just immersed in this unfolding moment and trying to understand it secularly, spiritually, and navigate things myself and with my family, because I see the worst possible outcome, maybe, or maybe I don't even. And then I see what this is really about, I guess, on a spiritual level. First of all, I think we all chose to incarnate at this moment. So anytime I feel like a victim, or I think about my children and, oh, wow, what a life are they going to live? I think, wow, they chose this with me. And until you get to that point, it's difficult to live in this plane, because, so I take responsibility for the fact I'm here. And I also feel a tremendous opportunity, which is that I think all of us know, or maybe we don't, but let's just say, I use Amazon as an example. Amazon is just so magical, right? You just order something you might need, it might be something like even like a natural medicine, and bam, it can get there within a few hours. That's amazing. But then Amazon is a, CDC funding partner, and they have a whole vaccine at your door program, and then they're, integrated into the deep state architecture and the surveillance capitalism layer, and you realize, wow, I'm upset at COVID-19 shutting down the world. Well, I'm still, paying for Amazon services. So that's where this moment is, to show us that to the degree that we've hooked ourselves into being dependent on the system in any way, we can't complain. And that we are now at the point where we have to, or we have an opportunity to create that system, as Bucky Fuller used to say, that will replace or make obsolete the one that we're having trouble with. And, I was becoming a nerd. I was ready to sit here, and after my book was out, I was going to really focus on just being with myself, which I'm still doing. It takes a lot of self-work just to be alive, right?
Right.
But now I realize it's not as easy as that. I got to wake back up and be really on my A game and still do the work, but then still, like everyone else here, try to figure out how to navigate this window. I do think it is, because I used to be, in a birth center, so I know a little bit about births from the, professional perspective, but the transition, right? When the hormones are surging, like this limbic activation, and suddenly the pregnant woman like just gets upset at her husband, it's like, but that's what's needed to get through the birth canal. Another metaphor is ayahuasca. A lot of us, I personally don't actually have a direct experience with it, but I know enough about it. But those who didn't know they were being delivered ayahuasca don't even know what it is. That's the majority of people out here. Those who've had some experience doing that deep shadow work and excavating toxic gunk that's accumulated, and they know that this is that moment. And if we get through that birth canal, and we will, some of us will, intentionally, then there's such a beautiful world. It's like going through the death spiral of Bardo before you come to the light. You go through all the flesh-eating demons of your own psyche, accumulated samskaras, and then you realize, oh my Lord, I deserve absolute love. I am absolute love. I do believe that's at our core, but this is what we're going through, and it's going to be an experience. And so on some level, that's what COVID is. But I can go all into the details of, the conspiracies and the mechanics and the timelines too,
Why don't we do that? How do you feel about that? You wanna talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean,
how's your? I know you're. We're approaching the hour, so I want to be.
Oh no, I'm good.
To your time.
I've got time. Yeah.
Okay, so if you want to hear, say or speak about this a little bit more, then type in the word yes in the chat. And I see a lot. Okay, the yeses are just gonna come flying in. So
someone should say no. He's a blowhard. Enough. Okay. All right. A lot of yeppers. All right. Cool. Okay. Is there a specific dimension that you want to?
Well, why don't we start? With COVID 101? Right. You've created a website. Maybe we can talk about that, questioning kind of the mainstream narrative that's going on right now. Cool. I think that all of us are at this point, if you're not questioning, then the only test that we need to do is shine a light in one ear and make sure there isn't light coming out the other end, right? Mm-hmm. Like all of us on this call or on this webinar watching this are at least many questions have popped up for us. I think the main question that people have, at least initially, is COVID real, right? So that question comes up, and I see all kinds of, different people saying it's real. Some people saying not real. Some people saying man-made. Some people saying it's from a wet market in China. Like what have you uncovered?
Okay, so I love the question, because I think the question is really the rate limiting step, because everyone's asking it, myself included. The moment you ask, is it real? It's both, right? Meaning, yes, there's an element to the history of our government and the medical, military, industrial establishment where development of gain of function viruses that have both high transmissibility and high lethality, definitely, they've been spending decades on that. So yes, it's totally possible. In Wuhan, there was a viral particle or weaponized exosome in tandem with an actual toxicant, because usually poisoning is what causes these sorts of, very, hyperbolic type of symptoms that you saw initially in China, people just dropping dead on the street. So yes, but the weaponized germ theory model is much more, I think, applicable, meaning the propaganda that followed helped you to understand why they would have even made the effort of creating what you could call a biological 9/11, because that's really what this is from my perspective. And also historically, if you look at Event 201, which was put together by the Hopkins Security Center, as well as the Gates Foundation and the World Economic Forum in October of 2019 in New York City, which ran the exact same thing, a global coronavirus deadly pandemic that took over the world, required military intervention, shut down the economy, shut down social media. They literally ran this live Hollywood-style exercise before it happened. And you can't make this stuff up. But if you look deeper into what they did before, Dark Winter, Clade X, I mean, one of them simulated something not unlike the anthrax letter attacks, right, that happened right after 9/11. So you start understanding, wow, this is the new 9/11. It's a global 9/11. And then you start understanding, oh, the Patriot Act, and oh, okay, invading the Middle East illegally, and all the things that followed, right, to totally reorganize the chessboard geopolitically. Wow, no wonder we're experiencing this. So then it makes more sense, because if you just say, oh, it's just a psyop, which at times I've said things like that, it's really miscommunicates the point, is that no, there's definitely an element here, and the government historically has run illegal, highly unethical mass experimentation and or attacks on its own populations. And so I'm half Korean. I went through an entire documentary on what happened during the Korean War, where the United States actually ran biological weapons attacks in China, plague, and all types of worst possible thing you could find. And then they got caught when their planes went down. Even the airmen did a statement, and they still won't admit they did it. But this has been going on for so long. So, you know, so part of it is whether you've already taken the red pill or had to with what 9/11 really was about. Because if you kind of know that it was not a aluminum plane taking down at, you know, free fall speeds, towers with jet fuel, I mean, it's like, this is the same thing. For them to tell you, oh, there's a real viral particle that's so deadly that the entire world has to risk maybe killing 1 billion plus people, the downstream effects that this will have on the poor countries is just so, it's so beyond. But if you see it as a controlled demolition and fitting into a very ancient depopulation agenda, including eugenics, which started in this country, was exported through Wall Street to the Third Reich, and you start understanding Project Paperclip and how it all weaves back together, you're like, okay, this is as crazy as what happened in, you know, Nazi Germany. Because it is, it's the same thing still. We have never really gotten out of it. So I would say yes. And I also think what could happen, because this is a pandemic with multiple phases, is they could do an attack anywhere in the country. It could be putting poisons in drinking water in a certain area. And then of course they say it's a new strain. The point is this is an endless war on your own body now. So that whole model transmogrified into the body itself is dangerous, and human contact is now deadly. And that's why forever after, humans need to be controlled, monitored, surveilled, chipped, and vaccinated, altered their DNA with RNA, DNA vaccines. I mean, this is a horror story come real. But those of us who've been studying this for decades now and knew that the writing was on the wall, it's vindicating, because now we're not the only freaks out there that everyone says is tinfoil hats and should be put in a psych ward. Now everyone sees, wow, this stuff is really true. And it's always been true. Like, we are empire, the United States, the luxuries, the beauty we experience has been predicated on really just the domination and rape of other countries. And I've never felt good about that. I'm proud to be American. Like, I'm very happy that we have a constitution. There are very good people here. We are so blessed, but we're also, in many ways, it's childhood's end as well. And that what we're gonna start experiencing in certain areas in this country is not that different from what many generations have had to suffer under our government's hand, done in our name. So that's where, okay, it's time to take radical responsibility here. Again, you're not responsible for the harm another person does to another person, but once you become aware of the system and the collusion and the consent and where your taxes go. I pay a ton of taxes, and it goes to things that I know are harming other people. How can I say that's not unethical? I don't want to pay the IRS a dime, but I'm doing it because I don't want to get arrested by not paying them. It's like a mafia. The whole thing is so set up to be immoral. So anyway, that was my, flourish.
No, I love how this is validating what many people have been able to witness, right? And you know, we've, as a healthcare practitioner, uh, you kind of witness what's happening in healthcare and in medicine, and then you kind of extrapolate that out into other entities, and you can see it happening. But why is it that other people can't see it? I mean, it's just, that's what scares me, is that this is the people on this call, unfortunately, are probably the minority, the awake minority. And I know more and more people are starting to wake up, but like, what do we do? What do we do? What would Sayer do?
Okay. I believe the Navajo proverb that you can't wake someone pretending to be asleep is super helpful. And I
Yes.
was in that category too, you know, I mean, meaning, and I still am on a daily basis, you know, given what moment you interact with me on, is like, it's trauma. Trauma to me is the basis for everything that seems wrong and off about human behavior. And the people that are really in control, who've, you know, dedicated their entire life to gaining power in the way that they have, they are the most actually in need of compassion, and no one wants to give it to them because they're doing some really bad things. So, but I do believe that the solution is internal, as I know you're such a great advocate of. The more trauma I heal in myself, the more I know the world is healed. And that is really true, because even in the Buddhist tradition, which I've been very influenced by, that was one thing that made sense to me, is like quotes like, you know, no one on the planet deserves love more than you. You know, this is not different from what Louise Hay wants us to do, to touch ourselves and to just send that message. Because if we can heal ourselves, I have faith that everything can start healing. It's not actually through a lot of what I do. In fact, I do the opposite. Often I go out there and say, this is bad and this is true and you should get upset. And honestly, that model may do more harm than good. It's maybe more, at least therapy for me, but it isn't the same thing as holding a peaceful space in these very difficult times. Doesn't mean to maybe withhold information. Like I keep mentioning Event 201, and I don't know, a year ago, I wouldn't have even mentioned 9/11 for fear of my own health and my own family's well-being. But I feel like it's time now for us just to speak to facts. And if we're going to be taken out for doing that, well, then I guess that's my destiny. But I'd rather make that choice than, you know, regret not showing up in the right way for myself and my children. You know, the longer legacy of the world that they're going to have to live in, that's what I'm working towards with you guys.
Yeah, you know, at the top of the interview, you said we're all called to be born right now, in this moment. It's not by accident. It's with a higher purpose and intention. And you know, it's time for all of us to really lean into that,
Yes.
because if not us, then who? If not now, then when? And you know, how much can they push us before we don't, you know, push back? And you know, in Canada, it's really interesting because people here are very very complacent, and it's almost embarrassing. So they're, you know, I'm proud to be, I hold a citizenship in Canada and the US, and you know, I've met some amazing people both sides of the border. But I've seen, you know, just, it's just challenging because you want to help people and you want to shake them awake, but like you said, you can't, you know, you can't wake somebody up who's pretending to be asleep. And I just don't see how much longer this can be comfortable for people.
Yeah.
Businesses are being destroyed, people's lives are being destroyed, the school system's being destroyed. I just don't know like how much more people can take, and what it's going to take to get people to push back.
Yeah, I know. I reflect a lot on this, and I think a lot of us too here on this chat. It's a decision between how much energy I put into preparing for the coming storm, because I want to give people what I feel is helpful information, which is I feel like within 6 months to 2 years is when the fiat dollar system in this country is going to really go into its death spiral. I mean, based on Bitcoin and gold and silver right now, historical highs with gold and silver, you can see that's a sign of the patient has multiple hemorrhages. It's on transfusions. The transfusions are the Fed infinite quantitative easing. It's going to happen until the patient dies. And gold and silver are examples of this being, he's on its last leg. So what does that mean? Well, when you remove the hegemony of the dollar, which arguably would be good for the planet, you know, not good for our well-being necessarily, then you have to start thinking about what has real value, you know, what, and again, anyone who's saved money their dollar is getting completely taxed and devalued, and their purchasing power declines. So I'm better trying to understand what that means. Do we buy land? Do you start connecting with people locally who have actual skills that know how to grow and fix things, and start realizing, okay, what is the value I really bring to the planet? Maybe I'm a healer, maybe I'm a singer, maybe I love to cook, but that is going to be the new world that we create. And you're going to bring people into your life that you're going to be enriched just by their presence. It's not going to necessarily be family. Some people will have spouses and family members that they may not even share the same views on. And this is a time where that's coming up. So again, I think we're blessed to still have this technology, because it is sort of Aquarian in ways. It is enabling us to connect and feel supported by one another in a field that's very real as we transition into these next steps. I will say Kelly and I are starting to think about, we need a place where we can have chickens, you know? Chickens are a miracle. If you can have chickens, you can get a good portion of your food, if you eat eggs, of course, without even having to eat the chickens, and then start thinking about gardening. And all these things are going to be huge, because the more we decouple from this old energy system, the less likely we're going to see contact tracers and vaccinators at our door, and all the things that come with being completely tied into that dependency. For those who are out there who don't already know this, I think most of you do, the agenda is to make it mandatory to get the COVID pass, right? The immunity, digital passport, and the vaccine to enter into school, to have employment, to travel. I don't think they're going to go with hard martial law initially, where they're going to force it. There may be some attempts, but you know, the United States, we have at least the Constitution, the Second Amendment. So it's different than Europe and the Commonwealth, where they're already sort of taken over. So I think we are going to have an opportunity to at least find the place you want to be in for the between the next 6 months to 2 years, that you can ride the storm out in. Because this entire system is meant to come down, and we don't know what it's going to look like, but you're going to have a choice still to figure that out, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, it's a house of cards ready to fall. It's like a house of cards in a tornado, you know? And it's unfortunate that our entire economy, I feel like, has been built on solving problems that we ourselves have created. And it's all, you know, it's all very interesting to witness the storm from the eye of the storm, which is, I feel like we're all in that holding pattern right now, not knowing what's going to happen, but
Yeah.
there's something that awaits us. And one thing that, you know, this virus is like, let's just for a moment, without triggering anyone, assume that it's real, right? So it brings me to the next topic, which is masks. And I have yet to wear a mask personally. Claustrophobic, and I just don't feel comfortable wearing a mask. And I was actually in Home Depot a couple of weeks ago, and I was literally the only one not wearing a mask. And I held my ground, and the guy politely asked me to leave, and I'm like, hey, I've got the stuff in my hand, what do you want me to do? And then he starts encroaching in my space, and I'm like, dude, get 6 feet away from me. And he just created his whole scene, right?
Yeah.
So anyways, like, you know, as a healthcare practitioner, as somebody who, let's just for a moment assume that this virus is real, and I kind of laugh at the procedures that people are going through to try to protect themselves from a virus by using a mask. Like how, you know, tell me I'm right or tell me I'm wrong. I don't know,
okay.
but
I'd love to.
What are your thoughts?
No, this is such an important fact. Okay, first of all, absolutely, I do not believe in conventional viral, germ theory. And I can go deep down the rabbit hole on that, but we can go to questioningcovid.com for those who need to know the truth on the topic, as far as I understand it. But it's better to assume it is real, as you pointed out, because the majority of people out there believe in deadly invisible particles. We were in the Middle Ages with our beak masks, and there were devils around that just infect people. It's the same thing. There's no rationality here. They're already in their limbic system. They're already thinking this is real, and they're afraid of you now, because you could take their life because you're not wearing a mask, and they're scared of that. So let's assume it's real. Well, the masks, according to the World Health Organization's own guidance statements, until only very recently, due to political pressure, made it so clear that they do not work for preventing transmission of respiratory viruses in community settings, nor has there ever been an example in human history where we've done what we're doing now with the mask, where there's no controlling for people slopping on a do-it-yourself like napkin or handkerchief. And the reason is multifold why that's true. But let's say you have a mask like an N95 or something, or one of these medical surgical masks. When you're breathing through it, you're actually aerosolizing and micronizing the very droplets that they're afraid could go into your body that can't actually get through the, I think it's like 2 or 3 micron sized pores in the mask. So you've just created the very thing that you're trying to prevent by even putting one on your face. But the primary reason why they're problematic is because they accumulate biological debris. If you believe in conventional viral particles, they accumulate viral particles. They're called fomites. They're these dirty things like the Fauci live cast where he's touching his face constantly and they're taking it on and off and no one's washing them. And the thing is absolutely disgusting in terms of it being more like a face diaper than anything else. So the research, the epidemiology, the guidance from the World Health Organization and initially the CDC was absolutely don't do this. In fact, they were saying you got to save them for the medical staff. They need them. Don't wear them. It is about a submission signaling agenda. And those who want to go really down the rabbit hole, I mean, people can talk about the whole Luciferian codes embedded in this 6-foot distance ritual. Consider that they're basically reprogramming all human interaction. So you're afraid and you're applying this almost like numerology-like twisted formula that makes no sense. And furthermore, assuming that somehow being 6 feet away is going to be equivalent to wearing a mask. And none of this has ever been studied or validated. So it is, in fact, all the Democratic governors are the ones whose states have mandatory mask mandates. I mean, it's really insane what's happening in terms of the political divide. I'm not pro-Trump or Republican, by the way. I believe it's the entertainment division of the military, medical, industrial establishment to get involved in politics.
I agree.
Totally. Oh, you're giving the prana of your belief, your life energy, your divinity to essentially the powers that they fund both sides. They fund both sides of wars, both sides of the aisle. I mean, it's just amazing to think anyone thinks this, the QAnon thing, I mean, it's hopium. I mean, it's not amazing to me because actually I was starting to believe it. And then I started to get the reality check that, wow, I'm just giving away all my power. We're here to save ourselves, take care of ourselves. And that's the whole message. So for those who want to be empowered, go to Stand for Health Freedom. It's a nonprofit I co-founded, which has a campaign that already almost 300,000 emails have been sent, which has 71 references. The science, it gives you really solid talking points. So you can say, no, I don't consent. This is not constitutional. It violates all of my human rights, basically, to do this. It's not based on evidence. It's absolutely the opposite. The evidence says you don't wear masks. Hypercarbia with excess CO2, and you get hypoxemia. There's all these harmful effects of masks as well that I didn't even really talk about.
Yeah, and so how do we get around this? Like, what are the ways to get around this? Because, they are mandatory in some places. So what would you suggest to somebody, or what would you do in a situation where a mask is required? Let's say travel, for example.
I empathize with those who have to travel. I'm fortunate that I, of course, have a digital source of advocacy and livelihood. So for those who do, I will say this, Kelly and I were joking about this because we will not put a mask on for any reason other than before this happened, we were wearing masks to get the erotoxicosis issue mitigated on planes. Because the planes use the bleed air from the jets and put them through the cabin, and there's a highly toxic organophosphate known as TCP that's in the air you're breathing. So if there ever was a reason to wear a mask, it's actually on a plane. So theoretically, you could at least get a mask that protects you. Cambridge is one of the companies that makes one. And that's why originally in Asia, they were wearing them for pollution, because 5,000 people die in China from respiratory disease caused from air pollution. That's the whole part of this psyop. And I'll call it a psyop because it's a viral false flag. Viruses have always served to distract people from the real causes of disease, which is the cellular model. The cell should not have to be exposed to infinite toxicant exposure, infinite non-native EMF, infinitely inappropriate food. The cell is compromised, and then it leads to degradation, including excreting nucleic acids, which is Thomas Cohen's model for what they're picking up with PCR. It's not COVID-19. In fact, it can't test for a specific strain. It's nucleic acid that's been amplified through PCR. So cells degrade, die, they give up these debris. That's what we're falsely identifying as viral particles. The people are obviously already sick. That's why they have more of those, versus a healthy person's cell has the tensile strength of steel in its membrane. So there's no way a viral particle that's obligate parasite that doesn't have an inner motive force could penetrate anything. The whole model is absurd, conventional viral theory. So anyway, I have another model, questioning COVID. Is this really about COVID-19? It goes into xenohormesis and exosomes, providing an alternative explanation for what viral-based infectivity models are really about.
So the Questioning COVID website, just so I can share this with everyone, it's just that, right? Questioning COVID?
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'll post that in the chat so you guys can go ahead and click on that and make sure you get access to that information. And then you mentioned a mask that would prevent that. You know, I always wondered what that smell was. When you got onto a plane, I'm like, why does it smell like fuel in here right now?
Yes.
And what's happening to me right now? I always wonder why that was the case. Is there a particular reason they do that, or is it a flaw in the design?
You know what it is? Yeah, it's a flaw, because what they did is in the 50s, I believe it was, they designed the plane so they wouldn't take air from outside the cabin where it's clean, unless you happen to be in a Boeing, 787 Dreamliner. So there's starting to be some reform in the industry, they're retrofitting, but the air is coming from the jet. And it's called bleed air, and it has chemicals, all these micronized toxicants that are very unique because they have to sustain high pressures and heat. So they're very toxic. And TCP is, I think it might have been IG Farben that actually originally discovered it. And that's the company that created, Cyclone B, you know, the gas for the chambers in the Holocaust. The history behind this is really disturbing, but many people are suffering from aerotoxicosis, and jet lag isn't from time zones. It's because you're being poisoned throughout the cabin. You already have hypoxia because the cabin's pressurized, have lower oxygen. So it's really a bad situation, but if you know about it ahead of time, you can definitely take some precaution. If you go to Agreement Info and you look at the topic of aerotoxicosis, I've written about it many times. It's really a big issue because I used to fly a lot, and now I don't, and primarily for that reason.
Yeah, you know, I fly quite a bit, and an interesting thing is I haven't been flying. My last trip was to Portugal right before, you know, everything got shut down in March. And I've noticed like significant improvements in my HRV. My HRV jumped like 30 points, like it's gone up 10 points every month. And it's kind of flattening out around 100 right now, which I'm pretty proud of. So uncharted waters for me in terms of kind of opening up that heart, if you will. Cool. And then the other thing I noticed is my resting heart rate has gone down almost 5 beats per minute. So I'm wondering how much of that has to do with the toxicity of flying, you know, and you're right. Many of us attribute this to, you know, jet lag and being in different time zones or, you know, stuff like that. And maybe there's something to that, but I think it's more like what you're saying, which is toxicity. And some people are better at detoxifying than others, right? And also some people's tipping points might be a little bit different than other people's. So one of my clients, that actually first client that comes to my head, is a client of mine that flies quite a bit, and he's actually got some detox genes that he's missing. And he's been searching for all kinds of answers as far as why he's not feeling well. And we ran a genetic test on him and uncovered this. And so he's been eating organic and doing all these things, but it could be the fact that he's on the plane and breathing in these disgusting toxins that's causing him to have all these issues. So thanks for sharing that. I always wondered about that. Now I know. Yeah,
there were internal documents released from Boeing that said there would need to be tombstones before they would actually effectively address the issue, meaning they know it's deadly. They know it's causing all these airline workers to have all these neurological problems, early death. and it's a $1 trillion liability piece. But now that the airlines are effectively gone, or they'll be, ingested into the Federal Reserve's balance sheet or whatever, I mean, basically what's going on is trillions of dollars have been created, and all these assets are being taken over by whoever owns the Federal Reserve, which actually is not anyone in the United States or the government. So, this is when you really get down into the Federal Reserve and Federal Reserve Act of 1913, you realize we've been hijacked for quite, well, over 100 years. We haven't been independent because the economics rule the politics. And that's what I think we're realizing. When the World Economic Forum publishes a book called The Great Reset, I went ahead and read it. It's by Klaus Schwab, the chairman. You want to kind of know what they're talking about, because they're talking about this lasting 2 to 3 years. When they say this lasting, the cessation of economic and social behavior on the planet. And they talk about it as if it's a World War III. Of course they talk about it that way. That was their intention. They helped architect it and roll it out. And they're talking as if, oh, it's a great green opportunity. It's the, UN sustainable agenda goals, which is anything but sustainable. It's like develop gulags for most people and roll in the Chinese technocratic dystopia. That's part of what we're seeing roll out throughout the country under the auspices, the guise of COVID-19 being a real thing.
So we always have to question who's benefiting from this, and that's part of, our questions that we have to ask is somebody's coming out ahead through all this while millions or billions across the world are suffering. There are a small group of people that are benefiting, but it kind of begs the question, right? So for me, at least, I'll play devil's advocate for a second because I think it makes for better conversation is, so isn't this technology and then this negative stuff affecting these individuals? Or is there some sort of antidote that they have that shelters them from this? That's what makes me curious, right? So things like 5G and chemtrails and, this poisoning that's taking place on airplanes, how do the elite protect themselves from these things? Maybe
well,
you take a page out of their book.
We're gonna go down that rabbit hole. Okay, well, I believe, as a colleague of mine describes it, that we're dealing with quaternary 4-part weapon system: vaccines, GMOs, EMF, like 5G, okay, vaccines, GMOs, EMF, and then geoengineering. They all fit together. And the agenda, when you put those pieces together, which includes things like transhumanism and AI type of singularity event, where they basically allow algorithms to run all human decisions, could be from what organs are being harvested in the gulag, in China, of Falun Gong practitioners, given to what individual. I mean, this is insane. It's the matrix in reality, but it is what is being rolled out. You have people like Elon Musk that people still hold up as some type of role model, who literally created Neuralink, which is to put electrodes into our brains using a sewing machine-like technology, just weaving them in so you can implant data and pull it out. They don't understand the last thing about the miracle of the human body and what consciousness is, and all these, the darkness that's descending under the cover of, oh, it's green, it's an electric car, and this guy really cares about human. It's just amazing. It's all CIA Project Mockingbird crap that now the mainstream, unfortunately, has completely swallowed, hook and sinker. Oh, sorry, I'm getting upset.
No. This is great dialogue and conversation. It's getting people to think, right? It's getting people to question what's going on and what's happening and who we praise and who we hold up on pedestals. And I think we should always question people that are held up on pedestals like that, because there's a reason that that's happening, right? There's a reason that he gets so much airtime, perhaps. Because there is a darker agenda. And I always say we already have artificial intelligence. It's humans that are trying to create intelligence or, replicate the intelligence of our body. And it's sad to see that. But, I'm glad that people are starting to question. We have resources like the ones that you've created for us. And it's just remarkable to see the world. I'm thinking about it from your perspective and perhaps even my perspective. Like, we've made a lot of decisions leading up to this point right now, and digitizing our businesses and things like that, and many people don't have that luxury, right? Like, so their jobs were taken away from them, their financial circumstances have radically and drastically changed, and the majority of people, are just a few weeks or a few months away from not being able to put food on their table. So it's disheartening. I'm going to ask you a question. If you had $1, let's say you had $1 in cash right now, how would you divide that dollar up? Where would you, or how would you allocate those resources to kind of, protect ourselves or, make smart decisions with our money?
If this dollar was, you mean outside of the basic survival needs of rent and food, or would that be included?
Yeah, well, assume it's $1 left over for.
Oh, okay. If it was $1 left over, that's easier. All right. So, oh man, right now in this moment, I would say half of it would go to silver, gold, okay, as a hedge for what may be the absolute destruction of the dollar. And gold, by the way, has far more upside. We're just seeing it happen now because the ratio gold to silver price has now suddenly come back into historical proportion. So gold can increase to, it's at 30 now, it could go to 100, it could go to 500, people say. And again, I'm not someone that likes to put money into things that you can't eat or that, is part of a scarcity model ultimately that only a few people can participate in. It's elitist. I've never been someone, by the way, to have much resources. Most of my life, I lived paycheck to paycheck. That only changed in my early 40s. So it's very close to me what it is like to have a lot of debt and have no money and have to just work a 9 to 5. So, and I was doing everything, stonemasonry and whatever I could to make a living. So what I would say is the other half, okay, so wait, gold, silver, crypto, and that's in part because I believe in the fundamentals of certain of those assets, if you will. Technically, they're not assets. It's more of a philosophical revolution that occurred. Bitcoin is the one, you can get all into altcoins and you can get lost. And it's, like gambling. Bitcoin is more about the fundamentals of what it represents. It should represent, as Andreas Antonopoulos says, an extinction level event for conventional finance. It was only born, unless the CIA created this as a psyop, in the crucible of the last economic crash, 2008, when Satoshi Nakayama donated it to the world. That's a what is it? Pseudonym. So it came as a gift from a nameless person to the world because it was a hedge against the inevitable collapse of the Ponzi scheme, which is conventional fiat currency. The other half I would put into self-regenerating systems that feed us. So that could be investing in a cooperative community farm, or if you have land or you want to acquire land to grow food, that would be, that's the direction I'm going. But one could make the argument one would invest in digitalizing, I hate to say it, one's value proposition as a unit of exchange with other people moving forward. So if you're a poet, you're a counselor, you're anything, you have something. It's a beautiful moment. Therefore, if we all plumb the depths of our soul and find what is truly valuable that we love, then we can go and use technology to share that. You can do half of it for free as service, and the other half you can charge. You can do a sliding scale. And then you start to be able to enter into the kind of freedom that you and I have been able to enjoy, at least temporarily. As you know, I've been pushing the envelope of deplatforming because I don't want this just to be a way to accumulate security, but I feel it's given to us so that we can help others as well. So that's what I would do, is invest in yourself as well. And that's ultimately what that's about for me. Now, if the collapse happens, so to speak, silver is a more realistic medium of exchange. Gold is too valuable, too precious. So you can take a little piece and trade it for some food. It's a little bit different than gold, and it's much more accessible because it's only, again, 30 an ounce right now.
Silver, you mean?
Silver an ounce, yeah.
So, okay, I love that. And, the stock market we can keep that out of the equation because that probably funds a lot of the things that we don't value, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. And the stock market, it's so blown up right now as a psyop to make people think that everything isn't collapsing, so that they pump trillions of dollars of fake money into it. And about 0.1% of the world's population will walk away with trillions of dollars. But they'll learn, like the Native American prophecy, that you can't eat your money when it all hits the fan. And I mean, they've been architecting also collapse and constriction of the food system. Much euthanasia occurred and tilling of plants in this window, and this is all part of their agenda. So I do believe that they are intentionally trying to restrict, collapse the food supply as well. When I say they, I'm talking about interests that are working within the United States, like the Fed, who have completely been controlled by, go ahead and do the research yourself, City of London, that kind of thing, International Bank of Settlements. Who's really running the world? Just follow the money trail.
All right, we're gonna be honorable of your time. I'm gonna ask you one more question.
Yes.
And I think it's the thing that is the greatest fear that people have, which is death. And so I'd love your concept and perceptions and ideas around death.
Yeah. Well, I guess I could say that for me, I believe that I've experienced something like a near-death experience. So it's hard to say, maybe it wasn't, but I can tell you that I was shocked to find that the other side, when my body was laying there and I was over here, it's not what people think. I thought for the longest time, lights are out, I'm done. I'm just a biological thing that happened and I'm gone forever. Quite the contrary. It could be exhilarating or terrifying to realize that actually, no. In fact, that's really when you wake up. So if anything, since that experience, I've been trying to find that level of vigilance and awakenedness in my life where we're slumbering around and we think everything has some secular explanation. It's arbitrary, or I'm a victim, or whatever. Life sucks, my body hurts. Trying to integrate that into my life. So I think for me, it's what Whitman said, which is that it's a far more beautiful thing than anyone could imagine. And from the majority of my life, I feared it. I was full of fear and trauma. A lot of it, I think, had to do with karma I brought in from a past life, as well as all the traumatizations of allopathic procedures that started when I was an infant. I literally was treated experimentally in a hospital in Dortmund, Germany, where I went to kindergarten. It was run by the Nazis' equivalent of the head of the CDC. Because a lot of those criminals ended up going right back into positions of power. And I remember other children in that hospital screaming, "Polizei, Polizei," as we're being rolled into these treatment areas. So like my experience of coming into this world and interacting with medicine was always already rather nightmarish. So I had a lot of traumas I still do in my body. So I believe that death is far more beautiful than anyone imagines. Yeah.
What's your daily routine like? Are there certain things that you can lean on to bring you back to that centered spot? Or is there a routine that you go through every day, or at least try your best to go through every day that helps you find yourself again?
Absolutely. I have a routine where I roll out of bed and I do a series of regenerative physical practices. And they're really based on rudimentary stretches and breathing. That's 30 minutes. And then I go right to my meditation seat and then do another 30 minutes of meditation, mantra, just basically trying to metabolize whatever psychic messages, debris were there from, and then set myself up for the day. So that's my daily practice. And it's been really, my wife Kelly does the same. It's beautiful. We have very synchronized schedules, and that's a great way to start. I do have children, so some days, there's noise and they come in and it's lovely, but as a family person, it's not always as easy, as it might sound.
Yeah. What's the thing that puts the biggest smile on your face right now, aside from your kids, of course, and Kelly?
Yeah, what puts my greatest smile on my face? Wow. Well, you know what? I bet it's probably my age. I mean, I'm 47, I'll be 48, and I've come to a point where I think the fear of death is no longer, as you just brought up, it's no longer as present to me. And I feel connected to guidance that really does feel like I can trust, that, I'm here in the world like anyone else, trying to do my best, and I'm trying to stay open and grateful for each moment, because it is a gift. And in this moment, I think that's the biggest thing for people to embrace, is that, there's no victimhood in that moment of being grateful, that my heart's still beating. I've always had a lot of physical trauma. I've always thought I was just going to die suddenly. So for me, it's always that's where I like to live. So that's been really helpful. And it may be my age, you know, I'm getting closer to the big one, but or not. Maybe we're just continue. That's what becoming wise and healing is you lose your fear of the things that would otherwise distract you. And so I'm trying to stay in that place. And it's really a place of gratitude.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciated our time together. I love you, my man. Send my love to the family.
Love you too, man.
You know, I just want to let you be in this moment. And, you know, there's a whole bunch of us on this call still. So please say your thank yous. Let's show Sayer some love and thank him for the time that he spent with us today, sharing his valuable insights and truths and, you know, waking us all up. I learned a lot of new things today. I'm going to be checking out some of the links that you shared. Yes, we will be sending a replay to everybody. And so please share that. I encourage you to share that far and wide, because there's millions of people that need to hear this dialogue and conversation. And if it just kind of pries the door open a little bit for them to, you know, take some action or investigate or reevaluate their perception of things right now, we need that more than ever. And you're not going to get this on mainstream media. We did this on Zoom because we didn't want it to have any risk of getting shut down or anything like that. And I'll be sure to download this as soon as it's available and then upload it so that we can share that with everyone. So thank you once again, my friend. I appreciate you.
And if I could just thank everyone, because I've had the chat window open and there's so much love and just respect and just, you know, I feel so good, because if it weren't for knowing there were people out there like you guys, I mean, my life would be far more empty and I wouldn't have the courage to do what I do. And so you guys are actually the reason why I'm able to do that. So thank you.
If you had to send, thank you, Sarah. If you had to send everyone to, let's say, one link, what would that link be right now?
Well, you know what I decided to do because of all the deplatforming and censorship is to create a Telegram channel where I'm putting out the content I curate for myself daily and then the links in this talk. So the channel link I can send to the chat afterwards and maybe we could post it as a link. So
yeah, I'll put that in the replay.
Yeah, that's the best place. The second best place is greenmaninfo.com/newsletter, because that's the daily newsletter. But the Telegram channel you'll see will be more personal. I'm going to just try to be more like this with you and just show up fully.
I love it. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for all your comments. Thank you for hanging out with us this beautiful afternoon. Sending lots of love to everybody. And, you know, as we go through this amazing unfolding and awakening, just know that we're all here to support one another. And it's just great to be able to use technology in a positive way and connect people like this. And thank you again, Sayer, for being here.
And just one thing, because someone asked, and my people would need to know this too, where is best to follow you?
Well, the thing that we'd love for people to do is, at least for this particular video, would be to go to perfectpracticelive.com. That's the event that you're going to be speaking at. So if you're a healthcare practitioner or provider, or, you know, looking to get into the functional medicine, lifestyle medicine, natural medicine world, then go to perfectpracticelive.com and say, or we can get a special link for you so that we can send that out in the email. And then the other thing I would suggest is if you're looking for help with your health and wellness and personal prosperity, you can go to becomeproof.com. And we've got a great morning routine you can download. We've also got some fantastic programs that follow Sayer's model of self-regeneration through personal responsibility and really tapping into your own innate healer. And the beautiful thing is we can do all that from the comfort of people's homes. And we love just waking up to amazing messages of transformations that are taking place. So becomeproof.com, get the morning routine as a good starting point, and then Perfect Practice Live for those of you that want to enter into this emerging field of healthcare, because it is ripe for disruption. It's happening as we speak. And it's not going to be the dinosaurs that are going to change their viewpoint overnight. It's going to be this emergence of new people who see the world through this lens and are willing to, you know, put their flag down, stake it in the ground, and make a commitment to waking people up. And it's happening right now. So I'm just so grateful to be in the midst of it all and witnessing it as it's unfolding.
Beautiful.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone. Much appreciation to you. And Sarah, I'll be in touch with you in just a moment. Okay.
Sounds great.
Bye.
Bye.